Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
Welcome to State of the Franchise, the podcast that talks about franchises of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, genres, and types. I am one of your hosts, Tom Stadler, here with my co-host as usual. Maybe a Muppet of a man, but not a man of a Muppet. Mr. Fred Dakin.
Hi-ho, Tom. How you doing?
Hi-ho, Fred.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm just feeling it. I'm feeling it right now. You know, I got no strings on me, and I feel like that's what makes me happy.
Well, I've never felt better. I'm very excited for today because we're going to be talking about something exciting. And to talk about this, we have a great guest. He's the producer of several great comedy shows, including The Chris Gethard Show, The George Lucas Talk Show, and Untitled Improv. We have Patrick Cotnoir with us today.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good. We're happy to have you on to talk Muppets.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, psyched to be here. I never will turn down an opportunity to talk about the Muppets. So
no, I mean,
when you asked for suggestions, I was like, well, this is it. Here we go. Now it's time.
Oh, yeah, I definitely jumped on it because it is one of the few things, like our title of our podcast, State of the Franchise, we really stretch the term franchise, but this is one of those properties that has so many facets. It's been in so many places. Like we kind of really can tack that franchise, term onto it.
Yeah. It's going to be, it's an exhaustive list of every type of franchise thing. They've done movies, they've done TV, they've done video games, they've done albums, they've done theme parks, they've done everything a franchise can be, they have tried.
They are like the jack of all trades franchise, truly.
Exactly.
Yeah, they fit into any square you want to throw at it. And I'm not going to hide my love for the Muppets. I've loved the Muppets like my whole life. So this is a dream come true to talk about them on a recorded medium.
I'm so glad you did not hide it. I really appreciate it. This would be a weird thing if we finished recording and you're like, I was really hiding how much I love them. Like, it would be weird.
I was edging the whole time. So there's a lot to be said about the Muppets, as we've talked about. They are a big, expansive franchise. But for anyone who's not familiar with the Muppets, they are what do you want to say? Like we just said, they're a puppet franchise. I mean, if you've seen the Muppets or you've heard of the Muppets, you probably know what they look like. It's with Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, and they've done, we talked about in movies, shows, the whole gamut. But really, it all kind of started, I think, with a long time ago when Jim Henson just kind of came up with all this, right? And it kind of came from something that was a small bit to something that's now a household name, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was surprised at how far back they went. I think 56, 57, Henson was doing shows. So 57 to 2023 when Muppets Mayhem has come up. That is a long time to be putting out.
A long time.
And still putting out new shows.
Yeah, I mean, mid-50s, they not to get too nerdy, but I'll give you a little bit more in depth as to the beginning, at least. Mid-50s, they were doing a lot of commercials in the DC area. That was like his main thing. He had a late night show called Sam and Friends that was like a 5-minute every night, aired on local, I think it was NBC in Washington.
Oh, wow.
And they were doing coffee commercials. They were doing dog food commercials, Chinese food commercials, everything that they could get money for, they were doing. And from there, it just kind of leapfrogged, bigger and bigger and bigger because they were on NBC. So they were able to do The Tonight Show because NBC knew who they were. And that from The Tonight Show, it got them Sesame Street, which got them, everything. So it's been a weird beginning that I feel like a lot of franchises don't do because, they usually just start here's a movie, here's a TV show. We'll start with that. But it's no, they were doing dog food commercials in the 50s.
Right.
And not and it's kind of I kind of grew up thinking the Muppets were a kid thing, for us, but it didn't start out that way. It was slightly raunchy at times. It was meant for adults, which I did not know that till I started doing research.
Yeah. I think that was what helped them survive is you're not just doing kids. Even like Sesame Street, which is like primarily targeted as a kids show, you can watch it and still find jokes in it that are really funny, even as an adult. The old stuff, the new stuff, like they want it to be fun for the parents to watch as well.
Right, because kids don't recognize like James Gandolfini or whoever coming on it. Like that's definitely for mom and dad's at home watching.
Yes. Dad wants to be excited because Michael Strahan's there, not because Abby's doing a spell. But it's I mean the Muppet Show even was on at like 8 p.m. on a Thursday or whatever. So like not necessarily peak kid hours.
No,
and not peak kid guests. It was very much like fun people you'd want to hang out with like at the time.
Right, like even like Alice Cooper. Yeah, it's like
You get Alice Cooper, but then you get like Mum and Schwantz, the like Swedish mime duo. Like it really ran the gamut. There's a flute player in one episode, and then you get Mark Hamill, doing Luke Skywalker and stuff, and it really. They were the biggest thing in the world for a couple of years, and that really helped them do what they want to do for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I mean, and they still last. I mean, all this stuff is available now on Disney Plus, our overlord streaming service that we must bow to if we want to consume anything Muppets. But it's definitely something that I feel like, no matter when you get started on, at what age, there was some kind of Muppet property. If you were born within the last 50 to 60 years, you probably have something that you remember. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you first recall your exposure to the Muppets, Patrick.
Yeah, for sure. My mom and my aunt were the perfect age for the Muppet Show when it was on. They were 8 to 12 years old or something like that, like during that time frame when it started up. And my aunt specifically had a lot of Muppet merch, whether that was books or the puppets that they put out for kids to buy at that point, or later on VHSs, stuff like that. So I would go over to my grandma's house, and she had all of my aunt's stuff out and about still, because she thought I would like it. And it was a lot of Muppet stuff. It was a lot of Star Wars stuff. It was a lot of Disney stuff. Like it's the stuff that I still love to this day. It was very influential because it was just around when I was a kid for the whole time. So like there was a long time when I was a child where it was like the 2 episodes of the Muppet Show I had seen were the Vincent Price and the Alice Cooper ones, because those were the 2 we had on VHS. Like those were the ones. And I had all the movies as a kid. I've seen that first movie probably more times than I've seen any other movie.
For sure. Wow.
Hundreds of times at this point. Like, and it was just really big for me as a kid. And it was what I wanted to do for a long time. I wanted to work as a puppeteer, but then more generally for the Muppets. And I've done a little bit. I interned at Sesame Street and I PA'd on a commercial with the Muppets. So like I've done a little bit, but the itch still isn't totally scratched. Like it's still, I still want to do it at some point for real.
I did want to ask about that. Like if you had any interactions with someone kind of, sounds bad, controlling a Muppet.
Yeah. No,
I know you had Steve Whitmire on the George Lucas talk show. Actually, my friend, shout out, Jeff Simpson was at that show. I used to live in Atlanta. He said it was great.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. I've been really lucky in that I've gotten to meet a lot of people that work on the things that I love, When I was a kid, the guy who played Big Bird and Oscar, his name is Carol Spinney. He played them for 50 years, wrote a book, and he was giving a talk at the University of Connecticut, which was like half an hour away from where we lived, because they have a big puppetry school there. And we went to this talk and heard him speak. And at the end, they were doing a Q&A, and I was 11, 12, something like that. And I asked, do you guys ever give tours of the set? Like that was the big thing, because I was, even at that age, I was like, I'm working my way in. Like I'm gonna figure out. Yeah. And he goes, no, but you got to know somebody, and like gave a little wink. Listeners can't see this, but so we went and met him at the end. He was signing the book, and I guess he like pulled my dad aside and got our address. And 6 months later, I got a postcard in the mail from him that said, hey, if you ever want to come to the set, here's my phone number. Give me a call and we'll figure it out. So I got to go to the set twice when I was like 13, 14, something like that, or three times when I was like 13, 14, in that middle school, high school era. and I stayed in touch with the right people, and that's how I got my internship in college when I moved to New York. So I've been around a lot of them, and it's always very exciting, and you don't lose that sense of like, holy shit, that's Grover, you know, or whatever. The time when I was there was a very weird period for Sesame because a lot of the original guys were stepping back or stepping down or dying. So like I was there the last time that Frank Oz did Sesame Street stuff until today. Like he still has not. And the guy who played the Count, I was there for his last record. The guy who used to play Elmo's now gone. Like Carol Spinney, who played Big Bird, like sort of stepped back like a year or two after that. So it was a very weird time where like this old guard was sort of passing the buck to the new guys. And it's very weird to think back on that, where like it didn't, while I was there, it didn't seem like we were doing that many eventful things because they weren't filming a lot while I was there. But looking back, it was like, oh, wow, you got there right at the right time to just like see all of these men in their 70s, you know, doing these characters for some of them the last time or one of the last times.
I was just going to say, I would really recommend anyone listening to check out the doc on Carol Spinney. I remember it being very intense, but
yeah,
one of the better docs about that world. And I recommend that. I also think it was interesting. We're kind of all roughly the same age that we probably came into Muppets at that time of such change, because I kind of always heard in my ears, like, that ain't the Muppets, man. I was like, what do you mean? They're the Muppets.
Which is crazy to think about, because now at this point, let's see, let me do this math really quick. We've had basically as much non-Jim Henson Kermit as we have had Jim Henson Kermit. And we've probably arguably had more hours of other people playing Kermit if you add up everything that they've done that we had for Jim, just because like he did it was like 55 to 1990, you know. Yeah. But then there's a lot of breaks, like those last 10 years he doesn't do a lot of stuff. Even the first couple of years he's doing a lot of Sesame that doesn't have a ton of Kermit. He's doing the Sam and Friends short show. The commercials don't have a ton of Kermit in them. So it is weird how people are like, oh, it's not the Muppets, that's not, you know, these are new guys, and you're like, well, at this point they're kind of the Kermit, you know.
Well, I just hate when people are like, Kermit doesn't even sound the same, and I'm like, I can't tell unless I really listen, or if it's like Jim Cummings doing it or something.
Sure. And I think the new Kermit, we call him the new Kermit, like, again, as you're saying, like, as though he's somehow new to this role. He's been doing it for how long now?
Well, there was a guy who was Kermit. Okay. Steve Whitmire did it. Again, sorry to get extremely in the weeds about this.
No, please do.
Whitmire did it from 90 to 2016.
Okay.
And then Matt Vogel took over in 2016 and has been doing it now. So there is technically a new Kermit. There's a new Kermit and then a new Kermit. So,
but I was doing like the Gene Hackman conversation thing with all the Kermit voices, because there's so many videos, and I'm just I mean, I can kind of tell they're different, but what does it matter?
Right.
Yeah. As long as it's fun, who cares? You know?
Exactly. And it doesn't need to be a perfect impression. Like, nobody was going to be exactly like Jim Henson, you know, whether it was Steve Whitmire or, you know, even the newer person. It's just... do they have the same spirit and the same kind of sound as Kermit? Like, no, I could try and do a Kermit the Frog, but it ain't going to sound halfway like them. You know?
Exactly. and you've got to be performing it at the same time, and you've got to like embody him in, you know, in the if you're doing a frickin' interview with Fallon, like improvising through that and whatever. Like, it's so much more than the voice, and I feel like people need to take that into consideration when they're bashing someone, you know, quote unquote bashing someone who,
right, or just like having your arm in the air.
Which, like, after a couple minutes is hard. You do it for like 3 or 4 minutes and it's tough. And some of those guys like have done parades where they do it for 2 hours, and it's just like, how do you do that? How do you, like, you know, how does that even you have one arm that just becomes like jacked.
Yeah. You know? I just think about like raising my hand in class. I would always have to do the like, other.
You know, the holding up under your arm. Yeah.
Does Sesame Street have a private like training facility? Like, guys are just getting swole in the back.
Crazy. It really is nuts. Like, you can, I think there's videos of some of them being like, here's my left arm, here's my right arm. And you're like, oh, wow, I genuinely like see the difference. But yeah. They have I don't know if this is spilling state secrets. I think this is out and about, but like if they're doing the like the Macy's parade or whatever, if Sesame's doing the Macy's parade, they will either have a pole inside Big Bird to help hold him up. So like your hand can be up there doing it, but there will also be something else giving it the
Support.
height and the correct proportions. Or you'll all of a sudden just see like Big Bird like leaning on Oscar's trash can or whatever. And that's just so he can take a few minutes as a break.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a wild profession, and more power to him, you know?
Absolutely, man. Well, no, that's pretty amazing to get some of the inside baseball on that too, because you do take it for granted. And I think that's something that I definitely want to explore as we keep going through the franchises, is thinking about the production value in some of these movies and what these puppeteers, if that's even the correct term of just calling them puppeteers, but the types of things that they would have to do to make some of these things that the characters are doing, like Miss Piggy flipping, or, you know, like doing her
Hermit riding a bike,
swimming, whatever. Yeah.
Right. Like they're probably doing more than, I was going to say Tom Cruise, but maybe I won't go that far because that man is jumping off cliffs and stuff like a maniac.
Oh, you never saw the part where Fozzie jumped off the Grand Canyon? You missed that clip?
Well, I do love like when a Muppet flies, they will just kind of like throw him. Yeah. And I love how that looks.
Yeah.
It does
It is funny watching the old stuff where they will just do that, and then now they're trying to like make it more modern and more, 2023, so it'll be like a bunch of guys in like green screens, and like they'll still have their hands in there like doing it while they're doing it, then they'll just like paint the guys out.
Sure.
But there is nothing like, a chicken or a penguin just being thrown in the air and it's the best. You can't beat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred, what was some of your first exposure to the Muppets? Do you remember?
For me, like I said, I kind of grew up on the second generation of it. I remember we had the Great Muppet Caper at one of my like family friends' house, and I remember, like, I think we talked about this, like when you were growing up, you'd have family friends and you kind of knew what movies they had, and you'd go over there and like, all right, they got a Great Muppet Caper, I can probably throw that on. So I watched that a bunch, and the movie that I've probably seen the most is Muppets Christmas Carol, and that one just really hits for me, and that's the first kind of non-Jim Henson one. And I think it has a lot of the stuff that the old movies did. Like, I really love the production design of London in that. I love how like the costuming is like kind of serious, like for the time, like people look Dickensian. The songs are great, and those are the two that I kind of grew up on. But I remember coming around in college to the Muppet movie, and I was like, this movie's like just as funny as Airplane. Like, it's a joke per minute. And like the cameos, it probably has the best cameos, or at least for me, the most recognizable. I know, like, as you go through like Manhattan, I was like, I know some of these people, but I just think that one has become one of my favorite movies. I love throwing on I love it has the opening scene with him playing the banjo and Dom DeLuise, but I think it's just overall like the comedy.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually just going to clarify too. So you're talking about the original Muppet movie, not the Muppets with Jason Segel.
No. I think with that one coming out, that was probably why I was like, I'm going to go back and check these out. But I was kind of upset when I went on Disney Plus. No Manhattan and no Muppets in Space. I just assumed they were on there.
Now, do you want to know why?
Yes, please.
Oh, please.
Because their Muppets from Space was Sony, and Manhattan was Columbia TriStar, I think. So those are the two that they don't own the rights to for distribution.
Interesting.
So that's why they're not there. I think they're on Amazon Prime, but don't quote me on that.
I paid good money to watch Muppets in Space, because that was one I had on VHS back when I was younger.
You should. I love it. Good. It's great. Yeah.
That's maybe the one I have not seen, believe it or not. I finally just watched Muppets Take Manhattan. Well, I think I had seen it a long time ago, but I didn't remember it. So like I felt like I was watching it again for the first time, like just going through it. But then when they got to the Muppet Babies cutscene, I was like, yes, now I remember watching this.
Yeah.
But I think because it's like it resonates so much with you. And I remember even being a kid and watching the animated Muppet Babies show. And that's probably one of my first memories is watching that show more than like even the Muppet Show itself or even the Muppet movies. But just like you, Fred, the Great Muppet Caper was a staple of my household. So it felt like every time, you know, I needed to reach for a movie, it was rotating between that and like Hook and something else.
Yeah, it was funny. Because I was a movie kid like since I was little, and I remember I recognized Charles Grodin being the dad in Beethoven.
Yeah,
and like my mom would say, I would tell her that like every time, like, and she was probably the one that told me.
Yeah,
but I'd be like, you know, that's the dad in Beethoven.
And now
he's
your
a
wife.
king, and he's so good in that movie. Like that's as good as he is in everything. That movie is. He wrote a great piece probably 10 years ago, maybe. I think it's for Vulture, where he goes back and recounts, quote unquote, his version of what happened behind the scenes with his torrid love affair with Miss Piggy. And it's so funny. You can Google it and find it online, but it's
I have
so
to
funny.
check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, love Grodin.
Yeah, you gotta.
And he's such a sleaze in that, and it was kind of funny. I saw what's the movie that was remade, the 70s movie where
Heartbreak Kid?
Yes, I saw that over pandemic. I think they were covering on Blank Check, and it's kind of like a similar character. Like he's playing this like sleazeball, but like he's got all this charm and charisma, and you're like, oh, I get why people might like want to follow this guy.
For sure. I mean, that's his vibe. You know, sleazeball with charm and charisma. That's Grodin right there. Man, we should have just done the franchise of Charles Grodin.
I know. It's like talk about Midnight Run.
Oh my God. Clifford,
He's like
Ishtar. Let's bring them all in.
Ishtar. Oh man. I haven't seen that in a long time, and I have to revisit it. I've been reading the Mike Nichols biography, and it's so interesting to find out the connections with him and Lane May to that movie too.
Yeah.
But not to get
ago, I should say, like 3 weeks ago, I realized I bought 3 Blu-rays that week, and it was Midnight Run, Ishtar, and Clifford, and I was like, well, I guess I'm just in a Grodin mood right
now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So now kind of getting a sense for where we all got exposed, I guess, and we've kind of touched on this already, but I did want to kind of get into a little bit of why the Muppets have resonated for so long. And if we want to talk a little about Sesame Street too, I think there's something to adding them to the element, because obviously it's like, I was trying to phrase this, and maybe Patrick, you can help us highlight what the difference is, because it's like not all. Sure. What am I trying to say? Sure. Not all those creations are Muppets, but not all the Muppets are like his creations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like for what I would consider Muppets, I would consider, I mean, there's the Muppets, which are Kermit, Fozzie, Piggy, Gonzo, Animal, whatever.
Sure.
Then there's Sesame and there's Fraggle Rock. And those are the 3 that I would consider Muppets.
Okay.
But then there's Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, and I would not consider those Muppets, even though they are Jim Henson Company owned and operated.
Yeah, isn't it kind of like, I don't know if this is like a similar kind of like hence there's the Henson Company that's making these elaborate, I don't know, like I was reading they did the animals for Animal Farm, like the 99 TV version.
Oh yeah.
Because it was funny, I was watching the Ustinov episode of the Muppets, and I went on I was like, oh, there's a connection here.
Yeah.
But I feel like
a funny episode to pick.
Well, I like Peter Ustinov. I like his voice.
Yeah. Great.
Like I don't know if anyone knows, he's the big one is he's the king in the Robin Hood, the animated Disney one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And if you haven't seen like the 90s Animal Farm with like the celebrity cast and the Jim Henson animals, it's like Dark Babe. I mean, you probably know the story of Animal Farm, but it's like the aesthetic of Babe, but like Animal Farm.
Yeah.
That's wild. I'm not familiar with that, but okay. So I think that makes sense, because like we could even say like Yoda's not a Muppet, but obviously well tied back to the Muppets, including Frank Oz. But I guess what is it about the Muppets that has resonated them for so long? You know, I mean, we talked about how they had their heyday back in the 70s, and then you know they went through this huge moment where Jim Henson died in 1990. And it kind of left everything in the lurch a little bit, but then they persevered to the point where we had this whole debate about like, oh yeah, no, they had voices that people were like, well, that's not the original, but it's still like people cared enough to have this conversation. So it's like, what is it about the Muppets that really keeps them alive even today, that we have a brand new show like that just came out this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're able to find ways to reinvent themselves and do new things where, Henson dies and they're like, what do we do? Okay, well, maybe we don't have the characters play themselves in a movie. We have them do Christmas Carol, and then we have them do, there's this video called like Muppet Classic Theater, which is just them doing like old, Greek myths and whatever.
Oh,
And
yes.
then they do Treasure Island after that. But then I think that gets a little maybe boring for them. So then they go and do Muppets Tonight, which is back to the format because they're like, let's try this again, where it's a, comedy variety show like the Muppet Show was. And I think they're just able to like fit into any mold. They can do whatever you need them to do. It can be a TV show. It can be a movie. You can play a video game. You can, they're not able to see this in the podcast, but I've got my Pigs in Space action figures right here on the wall. There's toys, there's merch. Like they're able to merchandise and like, and do all of these different kinds of things and update them and change them throughout the years, because you can do timeless comedy with them, but you can also do, some parody of something. Mostly on Sesame Street is where they're doing the parody stuff, but like you can do stuff that's very of the moment, and then stuff that you can watch 40 years later and be like, either I don't know what this is referencing, which is possible and it's happened to me a couple times, or I'm like, oh, that wasn't just its own thing, that was like making fun of a movie. Okay, I had no idea. Or it can just be funny comedy, and that's they figure out, they've cracked the code on what can keep them going. Now, does that mean that they're still the most relevant thing in the world? No, not necessarily, but I think they are trying to figure out how to keep them fresh and new. And they've done a lot of good stuff in the last 20 years. They've done a lot of bad stuff in the last 20 years that has not held up or has not been good. But it's always the thing when the good stuff happens, you're like, oh, I hope they take the right lessons from this. And I hope they know why this new thing worked. And like most things, sometimes they'll glom onto the things that you're like, no, that's not what made that good. Why'd you pick that? Like, no, go to this thing. This was the thing that was funny about it.
Yeah, I do want to talk about kind of the transition between the Muppets, the new one with Jason Segel, and Muppets Most Wanted, because I think exactly what you said right there is what I saw in that when I was just rewatching them. I'm like, okay, they took the wrong lessons of why that last one was so good. And it wasn't bad, but
no, I like Most Wanted. I actually like, and again, we're getting in the weeds. I like the extended cut of Muppets Most Wanted because I think Muppets Most Wanted, I think it moves a little too fast and the pacing is a little wonky. But if you watch that extended cut, ooh, baby, they slow it down and it's a little bit, it's a little bit better. That's my take.
That's good to know. I feel like I have to do that now on our rewatch because, the last watch, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that I loved it as much.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Muppets Most Wanted. That and the Mayhem are the two things I didn't get to. I'm pretty excited for Mayhem, though. I hear good things.
It's fun. Yeah.
I love the haunted, was it like haunted Muppets Haunted Mansion? That was great. I really dug that. But I'm kind of a sucker if you do like a Halloween thing, like I'm gonna enjoy it.
For sure.
I saw like the Vincent Price episode and I didn't watch it because I was like, you know what? Probably gonna save this till fall time.
Yeah.
It's great. It's one of the best ones of the show. But I think the Haunted Mansion special is really good. And I think that is, if they don't continue doing TV shows a la Muppet Mayhem, that I think doing those like two or three specials a year, and the more you make, the less it matters if each one is good.
Right.
If you make 3 a year and one is bad, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Like you can keep doing it.
Right. The Marvel model.
Exactly. Yeah. But then if 16 of them are bad, then it starts to be like,
I just really thought you said, and I'm in the room with you, I thought you said marble. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
The Marvel model, Fred. Aren't you familiar?
The thing I'm nervous with Muppet Mayhem that I don't want them to take off, like to be like, oh, this is what made this work. I don't want different TV shows about every character. I don't need that. I think this is a very specific thing that works. but I don't need a Ralph the Dog TV show. I don't need a Robin the Frog TV show, whatever. I think for the most part, you have to have groups together that make it work.
Right.
And I'm nervous that they're going to get excited being like, well, it'll be the Marvel method again, where it's just like, you give them all their own separate things and then they come together at the end. And it's like, all right, well, doesn't work for everybody. You know,
I would watch the Bobo the Bear show. I've been kind of into Bobo the Bear a lot.
Don't get me wrong. There's some
around here.
Don't get me wrong. There's some that would absolutely work for, but just nervous.
Statler and Waldorf, Critic Hour.
I will say they do this really well, but something that I'm kind of overseen from the Muppets is the story of like group of characters who are going to make it in Hollywood or some sort of business, because I feel like the first one's that Manhattan sounds like it's a little bit of that, and the Siegel one was that.
Yeah. The other thing that they have gone to the well a couple times in the last 15 years, 20 years is we got to get the band back together.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think you great. We've done it. We don't need to do it again. We got it. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to the next
Bands
thing.
together.
Yeah.
Band is together. Yeah. But then here we're going to be probably 20 years from now, and they're like, you know what? It's just enough time since that 2012 or 2011 movie.
Yeah.
Like,
The live action Muppet movie. What do you guys think about it?
Really funny.
there are some good gags though in that movie, and I do want to dive into that in a little bit, of just seeing like Jason Segel as a Muppet and then Walter as like, what is it, Jim Sheldon. Yeah, Jim Parsons. Yeah. Which is just great. Well, so I guess that maybe that's a good transition though to kind of get us into our history and highlights section of our show here. So we've already kind of highlighted a few things here, but feel free to jump in and we can start kind of really tackling these topics kind of as the years progress in this history. Mm-hmm. So back in 1955, as Patrick so well enlightened us already, that Jim Henson began working with puppets as a college student, creating the show Sam and Friends in 1955 for a local Washington, D.C. television station. And it was then that Henson's creations were in several variety shows and commercials that we talked about. So it was.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, that's you covered it perfectly. It was a great launching pad for this. Launch pad or lily pad? I don't know.
The Disney morning afternoon.
I was thinking lily pad, and then I was like, wait, launch pad and lily pad are two different things. So by the early 1960s, then, Henson moved to New York, where he had a regular guest spot on the Jimmy Dean Show, which featured Rolf the dog. Are you familiar with the Jimmy Dean Show days, Patrick?
Of course, yeah. It was a variety show. Jimmy Dean, people know as the sausage guy now.
Yeah.
That's been the lasting legacy of Jimmy Dean. I mean, the lasting legacy of the Jimmy Dean Show is Rolf the dog. That's like the thing when you Google the Jimmy Dean Show, like that's what comes up, you know? Mm-hmm. But he was like a country singer, and Rolf was sort of like his dog on the farm, you know, who would come in and tell jokes with him and stuff. And there's some funny stuff in there, but it's very much like a early 60s, very tame variety show. And Rolf was sort of like the one element of like chaotic energy that show had. Outside of it, it was just him singing about how much he, you know, loves his truck and his wife and all that stuff. Like that was pretty much the rest of that show.
But what about his breakfast sausage?
Not bad. They're not bad.
No arguments over here. Yeah. I would so like, are you someone who tracks down a lot of these kind of old clips of like this, you know, these performances, the Jimmy Dean Show? Are you want to see all of that?
I mean, when I was a kid, it was all I wanted to see, and it was like not on YouTube, you know, because there was no YouTube. There was no way. There was this guy who I was a little freak. You know, I am a little freak, but I was a little freak when I was a kid. And there was this guy who a lot, you know, in the 90s and 80s, like people would trade tapes of like Mystery Science Theater or whatever.
Yes.
And that was like a very popular way of doing it. There was this guy who had every Muppet thing you could freaking want. I think he's still doing it. His name's Kermie Clown is his name. And I would, you know, send him a check for like $5 and I'd get a VHS of them hosting the Tonight Show in the 70s, or like, you know, every music video they ever made or whatever. So that was the easy way to track it down. Now, a lot of it's on YouTube now. And when I was in New York, this guy Craig Shemin, who runs the Jim Henson Legacy, he's a longtime like writer, Jim Henson Company employee, and everything like that.
Sure.
He would do screenings at the Museum of the Moving Image, where it would just be like Sam and Friends, and it would just be like an hour and a half of every video of Sam and Friends that they had. Like,
Wow.
they don't have every episode because it's the 50s, and they would just delete stuff or like not know how to tape things or whatever it was, you know.
Mm.
But he was really good at cultivating, you know, old talk show appearances or old, you know, just clips featuring, you know, the Swedish Chef or whatever it was. And for a couple of years there, every month you'd go and he would have a new 90-minute thing where it'd just be like, what is this? I've never seen this before. This exists.
Wow.
And that's the thing I miss the most about living in New York are those screenings.
Yeah, having like screenings like that in a city, that's gotta be amazing.
Yeah, it ruled. It ruled.
It's so cool. Yeah, it makes me sad that like things like the Internet Archive too are sort of under attack under the whole thing of the copyright issue, which like understandable, but also it's like this is the way that people are doing this nowadays, right? It's like you weren't getting mad at these people for recording this stuff off their TV. So, you know, it's not like anybody's trying to turn this stuff for profit. They're literally putting it up there so that it's like, okay, if these websites, which have gotten deleted, delete, like, where are we going to find all this content? Just try and find it on YouTube? Well, what if they get pulled down? Yeah. It's like,
also, like, if you're the Jimmy Dean estate in 2023 and you think that people are really like clamoring for your content outside of these clips that like only nerds are looking for, like, let's take a step back and like actually think about what we're pulling down from the internet because you think you'll be able to put it on DVD. I don't know. Like, what do you think you're going to do with this? You know?
I don't know. I need my whole collection of Jimmy Dean DVD stuff.
Yeah, I need my 4K steelbook of the Jimmy Dean show.
Yeah. So fast forward just a bit. So then it was in 1969 that Jim Henson brought his talents to Sesame Street to build it. And I know you've talked a little bit about Sesame Street already, but can you help us understand how some of that went down?
Yeah, it was this woman named Joan Gans Cooney and this guy named Lloyd Morissette, I think is his last name. They were two educators and really just like studying what could help inner city kids learn to read and learn to write and learn to count and learn to do, you know, all of the things that were being taught at, to be frank, like white public schools throughout America. You know, education was not as, I don't even want to say not as standardized as it is today, because it's still an issue, obviously. But at that point, it was very different, the levels that kids were learning at. So they were like, let's do something that will be on TV for everyone. It'll be on public television. If you have a TV, you'll be able to see this, and we will teach you how to write. We will teach you how to read. You'll learn your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, whatever. And they're like, well, what will entice kids, but also keep them watching? They're like, well, we need humans to add the, like, this is a real thing. These are real people in front of you that you can learn from, you can trust, whatever, but also the Muppet stuff to keep you like there having fun. And they brought in Henson to go do it. There's a story where like he showed up for his first meeting and he was like a hippie, you know, like that was kind of his thing.
Yeah.
And he showed up wearing like a brown leather, like jangly, you know, jacket with the trim, like everything on it. And someone in the office thought he was there to blow up the office. Like,
oh my God.
Like, going to blow up and then someone was like, no, that's Jim Henson. He's like running this show. He's going to run this show with us. So yeah, it was a big part of that show, and he appreciated it as part of his career, but he also like didn't want to only be seen as a kid's entertainer. And I think that show was very limiting for him because he was nervous that, you know, I want to do a late night variety show or a primetime variety show. And if people see Bert and Ernie, they're going to think that's the only thing I can do. So I think he had to doubly work hard to like get out of that, which I'm sure we will talk about in a second.
Yeah, exactly. Because as we then moved into 1976, a little thing came along called The Muppet Show. They decided to play the music. They decided to light the lights. And I just realized what a miss that we didn't introduce that at the start.
I almost thought about starting the episode because like Kermit comes out with that energy. He's like, "We have a great show today. We're gonna show." Like, and I just can't. I cannot do it.
All right.
I was practicing in the car.
Can you do the arm flail? The yay! With the, oh my gosh! I wish people could see this.
Yeah.
So decided to get introduce the Muppets on the Muppet Show, or meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
So primetime variety show hosted by Kermit the Frog and regularly featuring some of the celebrity special guests that we've talked about already. But I mean, we got to get into the Muppet Show and talk about what a phenomenon it was at the time and how that's almost kind of the lasting trademark of the Muppets now.
Yeah, I mean, he was trying to boomerang back from being that kids performer. And the year before the Muppet Show, they're on, not the Muppets themselves, but Muppet characters are on the first season of Saturday Night Live. They're in most of the episodes of Saturday Night Live. And the Saturday Night Live writers, I'm going to swear right now, they fucking hated the Muppets. They hated having to write for them. They were like, basically like, you know, Belushi's out there being like, I want to be on screen. I don't want these pieces of felt to be on screen. Like, this is my time. So it was just not a match. But I think him trying to boomerang all the way to the other side of being like, adults, you know, we are for adults. And then finding that happy medium of the Muppet Show was what was really the key of like, oh, this can be for everybody. We don't need to pigeonhole ourselves into like just one or the other one, you know?
Yeah, is that why Blues Brothers is basically just ripping off the Muppet movie? Like,
I mean, I've never thought about it, but you're not wrong.
I just love like picturing because like when I think of like the original SNL casting of people that kind of liked it, that they enjoyed some partying, I just like imagine just, you know, Fozzie and Kermit just being there like, I don't know about these guys, Kermit.
So you look at a lot of those Muppet Show guest stars, and a lot of them were either SNL hosts or SNL casts or like people who were around that world. They sucked a lot of them in because they were like, oh, well, we know Gilda Radner liked us. Like, she'll come on the show. Let's get her. And it was an easy way. Early on, that show was not an easy sell to get guests on, which is something I think about a lot as a guest booker, where I'm like, how do you pitch this? Like, we shoot in London. You have to fly to London. It's a puppet show for stuff you've never heard of, really, you know?
Yeah.
Early on in that show, there's a lot of guests where you're like, I don't know who this is. I have no idea.
I jumped around a little.
Yeah. But it's interesting to watch the progression of like how they grew and changed. And then, you know, second season, they've got Steve Martin and like John Cleese and Milton Berle and like all these like comedy luminaries, Peter Sellers, you know, like pretty early on these things happened. But they were just lucky because their manager was the same guy who managed all the SNL people. So he was like this big, huge comedy manager at the time, and he was able to like call in so many favors to just be like, you get a free trip to London. Like, what else do you want? Just do the show. It'll be fun. But yeah, that shows really it's their legacy, and they're not going to be able to top it at this point, you know? Something else is not going to show up that's going to be bigger than that for them.
No, not a time. I mean, with how many people were watching TV at that time too, it's insane. But one thing that they don't talk about with that show, which when I was watching it, were the segments that are like, I'm going to use a word, I don't know if I'm going to use it right. Avant-garde, puppet stuff. Right. I did something there where it's like they'll turn down the lights and it's really cool visual puppet stuff. And I don't know if that would have worked in the movies, but I kind of wish I would have seen more of that. Kind of like these, like kind of, I don't know, like interpretive dances with puppets.
Yeah.
It feels like that stuff that they even kind of did a bit on Sesame Street then, like later on, because I have a lasting memory of watching Sesame Street as a kid, and there was this weird segment where it was like a mother like playing with like clay, and she was like making household objects, and then she ended up like making children with it. And I was like, wow, this is really deep. And I'm like, as like a 5-year-old, I'm like, what am I watching? And now thinking back, I'm always like just fascinated by this segment.
Yeah.
Like, why was this on Sesame Street?
I think they just wanted to like showcase talented people that they liked, you know?
Right.
There's a couple times later on in the Muppet Show, you go to like season 4 or 5 or whatever, where they would like bring in like a marionette guy to just come do 2 segments, and they'd just be like, here's Bruce Schwartz. He's not the main guest of the episode, but you're going to watch him do this now. And they would like just bring in like other people who were not doing similar types, because I think he just wanted to get puppetry out into the world. And that was the easiest way to do it, was like to show that they were not the only types of puppets out there, you know?
Yeah. And it made it feel more like a true variety show in that regard. Not to say that like, you know, SNL wasn't doing anything like that, but it has like, it almost has the grandeur like the Muppet Show does of like an SNL, but that they really kind of lean into, because they're doing, I mean, a lot of different things. I mean, you are like having to stage like, you know, sketches, right, with the Muppets, and then other stuff where it's just segments with the guest, right?
Yeah.
That was an inspiration for my favorite kid show, Lamb Chops Play Along.
Wow.
I feel like it had to have been, right?
Yeah, probably. That's
I think
so
you're
funny.
right. Yeah. I never made that connection either. Now I'm like, you know, actually.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm sure if you're a puppeteer and you see this working, you're like, okay, well, then I guess I'm going to try to do that because it worked for them and they stopped doing it. So now someone else needs to do it, you know?
Right. Well, and how many people got probably inspired seeing that there were people on like this humongous TV show at the time, just, you know, making puppets. And I have a memory of a teacher even telling me in class that he had a student years and years ago that he would be fascinated by the Muppets, and he wanted to make his own puppets. So he like made like for a project in school, he made like a puppet of Abraham Lincoln, and he made a video out of it. And without telling him, the teacher submitted it to Jim Henson Studios. And ended up getting a reply, and they said, "This is a great first effort. Go to school.
That's amazing.
Once you're done, give us a call. We'd like you to come and intern." And it was like, what an awesome thing. And just to have Jim Henson Studios like pay it forward and be like, hey, we recognize we probably inspired you, and we want to actually facilitate that creativity.
I mean, it makes sense for them, you know, like it's not a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. Like it's a very niche thing. So if someone shows interest, you want to encourage that, because they could be your next hire, you know, and like finding that talent is hard. And it was a lot of the same guys for a very long time. And I say guys, you know, and I think they've been actively trying in the past handful of years to like really diversify and expand that roster to not just make it the same 5 or 6 white guys who were doing all of the characters, you know?
Yeah, because Sesame Street was really good about that. That was kind of a big pitch for it, right? Like,
well, they were really good with their human cast.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The humans, not so much the When I picture all those puppeteers, I don't picture any diversity there.
They've gotten a lot better recently. They have like this really good program that guy Matt Vogel, who does Kermit now, he's also Big Bird on Sesame. He's helping to, you know, cultivate this next generation of people, because all of their performers are like at least 50 years old at this point. So it's like they're not getting younger. You can't hold up your arm forever. So like you need to bring these next kids to like help take over. And that's how this thing keeps running. You know, it's like it will just eat itself if you don't bring in new people. And I think they're working on that, hopefully, you know?
Right. Well, yeah. And I think you look at some of the just similar struggles that a lot of longtime shows are, I think, running into, you know, and I don't know, it's something that I think about, like how sad it is that some of those shows just kind of, I mean, even like The Simpsons, it took them forever to feel like finally start bringing in some people and be like, oh, maybe our characters of color should be voiced by actors of color. It's like,
it feels like it should be an obvious move, but, and I'm happy that they have figured that out at this point, but you do wish like, oh, could have done this 10 years ago and looked really cool. You know, it could have looked like really ahead of the pack, but
instead it felt like they were being more reactionary than proactive, which I mean, a lot of things have been that way.
Sure.
So from the Muppet Show, I know we've only kind of glossed over that, but we can obviously come back and talk more.
There's so much to do, we kind of have to gloss.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, the Muppets, their presence and their fame only grew from there, and they started starring in their own films. You know, the aforementioned Muppet movie, the first Muppet movie, as it says on Disney Plus, the original. Just to make sure that you're not confusing with all the other properties that are titled the Muppets now.
I know.
And then that basically led to them getting into other movies. In 1981, they had The Great Muppet Caper. 1984, The Muppets Take Manhattan. We ended up getting a theme park ride.
Yes.
What is it? Muppets 3D Vision?
Yeah.
Or Muppet Vision 3D?
Yeah.
Okay. Which, have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. It's great. It was the last thing that he did before he died. Not to jump ahead again. I mean, in the 80s, like they do those
jump around.
they do those three
House
movies.
of Pain style.
He's basically like, I need to take a break from the Muppets. Like, I need to do other stuff. So he starts doing Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, like trying to expand it. Those things don't really take in the public consciousness. So he goes back and he does another Muppet show, which is called the Jim Henson Hour, which is 50% Muppets, 50% weird creature, labyrinthy, dark crystal-y stuff.
Yeah.
That show doesn't take. So then he's like, all right, well, I guess they want us to go back to Muppets. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell the Muppets to Disney. Am I stepping on your toes by saying this? Is this something? Okay,
No.
Great.
Cool, right. Honestly, this is awesome to have all this extra information. So please keep going.
So he goes, I got to sell it to Disney. I'm tired. I'm getting old. I don't want to keep doing this. I'll do it occasionally, but it'll be so much easier for someone else who's running the day-to-day of it all. Because he was a businessman, but also like he wasn't. He was a performer and he was a creative, and he, having those other people in the background like running the actual ship was important for him, I think. So he goes to sell to Disney. It's very stressful. He doesn't really want to do it, but he knows that it's probably the right move. And they make the Muppets Go to Walt Disney World, which is a TV special, to help promote this because the Muppets have been bought by Disney. The paperwork is not signed yet officially. No ink has hit the page, but it's coming. We know it's coming. Charles Grodin's in that special. He's really funny in it.
That should be on Disney Plus.
It should. It's on YouTube, but it should be on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And then they do Muppet 3D, which is for MGM, Hollywood Studios, the park there. It's the last thing he does. He gets sick, does not go to the hospital in time, dies. Muppet 3D is not done yet. So they sort of complete it. It goes into the park, but the deal's off. The deal's done. So they do not get sold to Disney in 1990. And so Muppet 3D is this like sort of one relic for a very long time of like the promise of building a Muppet section of that park. They were going to build multiple rides, multiple live shows, whatever in this area of MGM, and that does not happen for a very long time. And yeah, Muppet 3D is great though. Muppet 3D is very funny. It's
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's like in the Muppet movie where it's all the Muppets in the movie theater.
Yeah.
They have that theater gives you the vibe that you are in that theater.
Yes.
Like you feel like because they have like the stuff in the top, like I think Statler Waldorf come out, like it gives you that chaotic feeling and it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
I think that was like my first like sensory experience in like any type of movie, and I was like, "What is going on?" There's like sounds like all this like stuff like going on around us. You can like smell the smoke.
Yeah,
just so fun. What a unique idea. And I think what I wanted to kind of get into here too is just how ahead of the times some of these things with the Muppets were. Because we did just kind of gloss over the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were all part of this kind of this 80s exploration that Jim Henson did, while these Muppet movies were still going on, but that people didn't feel like they were ready for them yet.
Yeah. Which is probably true. I mean, there's no way to know, but like he was always ahead of the curve. Even like in Muppet 3D, there's that character Waldo, who's a CG Muppet basically that shows up. And they pioneered this technology. I don't want to say him alone, but that company pioneered this technology that was called the Waldo. That was the name of the system, and that's why his name.
Oh, interesting.
It's an acronym. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a machine that it's basically like motion capturing like their hands, and it's like a robot puppet, which then translates to this CG character that's on a computer somewhere. But 1990. doing that. 1989, somewhere in there, is like bonkers. You know, that's crazy to think about that happening.
For all the laurels that Jurassic Park gets with Steven Spielberg doing like the CGI in that movie, it's like 3 years before.
We got Waldo C. Graphic. Come on. Show some respect.
Put some respect on Waldo.
But where's Waldo now, you guys?
It's hard to find him.
Still in Orlando, Florida. He is down
Still down there
since then. Yeah. But it's one of those things where you're like, what would he be doing now? What other crazy stuff would he have pioneered and worked on?
All the stuff Jim Cameron's just trying to get ahead of the game on now.
I know.
One thing I wanted to bring up when you were talking about the possible sell Disney was something that we haven't talked about was the merchandising. I did hear, I don't know if you know anything about this, that he was pretty adamant about like quality control of the merchandise that was related to the Muppets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know specific stuff, but you think about the stuff that they put out in the 70s and 80s for those toys, and like a lot of them are still out there because they're just like well made, you know, things that like people actually wanted. It wasn't just like thrown on everything. That I think that changed a little bit once they became huge. It became more of like a sure, okay, great, a lunchbox. Okay, but I think that's part of the nature of like getting extremely famous, you know. It's like you gotta
not to throw shade at some director or producer who puts all of his stuff on his merchandise.
Yes, exactly.
But I mean, trying to juxtapose those two things, I think, is where you're getting, Fred. Like, I always stick in my mind, and we did an episode recently on Star Wars merchandise, but just the Jar Jar Binks sucker, there you're like licking on his tongue, and I'm like, why did they do this? Who was asking for something like this?
And I was so hard up for candy, I didn't care, man.
And if you go look at the prices on eBay right now, I'd say a lot of people were asking for it.
People just need to finish those collections. They need to own everything. Yeah, right. But I think you look at something like, I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, but I mean, that's, I think, the first time we see the Muppets get used. Well, no, I suppose Yoda would be sort of a way to say that, sort of like a darker use of Muppets, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and you know, even Yoda, like they wanted Jim to do Yoda, and he was like, I don't have time, like I can't do this. But they were involved in helping Stuart Freeborn, who's the guy who created Yoda and built the puppet and like designed all of that. They were like, okay, talk to each other about what makes an easy to use puppet and like what makes something that will look good on screen and like play in a theater as like, oh, this is a real thing. Because that movie falls apart if Yoda does not work.
Right.
You know? You may not get Return of the Jedi if Yoda does not read as like a real living, you know, I don't want to say human being, but it's the thing right now. So it's a mix of like them working to make that puppet work and Frank Oz and the other puppeteers who are helping to bring that to life. But yeah, I mean, Dark Crystal and Labyrinth sort of is the middle ground between a Muppet and a Dark Crystal thing, you know, because they're kind of goofy and kind of silly, but also like creepy and weird and some of them real looking, you know.
Yeah, David Bowie's got some big Muppet energy in that movie.
He's got some big stuff for sure.
Oh yeah,
one big thing in that movie. Yeah.
Dance, magic, dance.
Big hair, big everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dark Crystal, though, you're right, though. That's like a purely Muppet production. Like, I'm not forgetting any live action things in that. There's nothing.
No.
Yeah, which is, and I think if you tried to release the Dark Crystal today, you know, you might get people responding maybe in a similar way that you had people respond to kind of like Into the Spider-Verse, right? Where it's like, we're kind of going off, you know, the main drag here. Everybody's about the live action superhero movies right now, but it's sort of like, well, no, but then people were catching this, you know, either in theaters or hearing it by word of mouth. And, you know, I could totally see, and I know they tried to bring the Dark Crystal back. I didn't watch any of the TV series, but it's definitely...
It's very similar in tone to the movie, the TV series.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised it didn't get more word of mouth attention.
When he was making that movie, his original goal was to have it all be subtitled.
Oh, wow.
And everyone was like, no, you can't do that. Like, it will, your ticket sales will be zero. And then he like did it. He, had them speak English and the ticket sales were still basically zero. So he was like, all right, well then we should have just tried it. We should have just done that,
Yeah.
I think that those two movies kind of broke him a little bit, broke his spirit a little bit as to trying new things, which is a shame.
It is, and it's too bad because you think maybe if the '90s had been kinder to him and he had been able to live on, we're just gonna talk about what would have come next.
Yeah,
but we do know what came next in the '80s because Henson also brought to life Fraggle Rock, the third leg of the trinity here of Muppets. Which I don't have a lot of memory of Fraggle Rock, but did you guys both watch it, or have you watched it later on in life?
No, I have not. I remember seeing trailers for like maybe a DVD or a VHS like collection at one point, but I had never checked out Fraggle Rock. What about you, Patrick?
Well, this is the Blu-ray collection right here where I'm pointing right behind.
Wow.
Yeah, it was never my thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change the fact that the Blu-ray's right there, but it was never really my thing. I don't know why. It was an HBO thing, and we never had HBO, so I think it like rarely reran on Disney Channel. Maybe I don't even remember where it was, but I didn't see a lot of it, and I think that's probably a big part of it. But that was his like, we need to take care of the environment show, and like be nice to each other and stop wars, and like everyone needs to just relax and love each other, which all of the projects sort of have that vibe to it, but this one is overtly like, we all live in an ecosystem and we all need to work together, because if the Fraggles destroy the Doozer houses, then the Gorks have nothing to eat. So like, what are we doing? You guys got this is all part of one big picture that you need to step back and take a good thought before you do things that will hurt other people.
Right.
It's a very nice show. It's a very good show, I think, and I think they brought it back, and it's on Apple Plus right now. They made a new season, and it feels like the old show, and it's very good.
Really?
They're doing some more that I think will be out soon, but it's a nice show. It's just not my show that I
it has kind of a bop for a theme song, doesn't it, though? I kind of remember people talking that up. Oh
yeah, it's great.
I love it.
That's great. We're gonna go live with that and just produce that as our new theme song. But yeah, I think it's definitely of that time too. I think there was a lot of environmental consciousness that unfortunately didn't carry forward, but we don't have a lot of time to get into all that.
Yeah.
But
you can see like kind of his hippie worldview, I feel, as we can go into his movies, especially with the first Muppet movie, because everyone treats the Muppets in that movies like hippies. They're like, get out of here, or they're trying to cut off their legs.
Yeah. It's a different time.
It is, and it's such a great I know there's been road trip movies before that, because obviously you had like Vacation, Vacation even came out a year after that, didn't it? It was 1979 for Muppet movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, look at this. All these SNL alums are just like, it'd be great. We should. But it's such a fun concept though, to be like, okay, go and get the Muppets, and you have Sweetums constantly trying to chase them down.
Yeah. That was the joke on like whatever VHS that had the trailer for that movie. I remember seeing that clip so many times, just watching like VHS at home, like Hollywood, and running after the car. I love Fork in the Road. I mean, it's right there. It's
the best movie. It's my number one movie out of any movie.
Oh wow!
Like any movie ever.
Any movie that is Patrick's number one movie.
Wow.
Unimpeachable. It would take so much to surpass that.
It really would, just for the jokes per minute, the songs, the cameos. The Dr. T section of that movie is my favorite scene of the Muppet movie. I have too much nostalgia for Christmas Carol that I can't shake. So, but I probably agree Muppets movie is where it's at. But shot where they pour the paint over the camera is such a great shot in that song. Can you picture that? I listened to that on the ride home on repeat today because I just wanted to get like that. Can I get your bitch or something?
Yeah.
She's grinning like a Cheshire cat.
Well, I mean, I got a road trip coming up with my fiance, and I feel like every time I'm in the car on a long road trip, I think in my head, I'm like, moving right along.
I do that in the song from the Goofy movie. That's a pretty good road trip song in that movie. You know.
Yeah. So good. So good. But yeah, I mean, and the cameos, like we were talking about, they are so great in that. It was even just Steve Martin, that bit just never gets old. And I mean, he really, I think, was such a champion for the Muppets at that time, which feels that'd be so great.
I didn't know Elliot Gould was in all like 3 of those kind of OG movies in like smaller parts and some bigger parts and others.
He's not in Great Muppet Caper, but he's in Take Manhattan. And
I thought in Muppet Caper, he's the guy who throws them from the plane. It's like he doesn't even talk.
Is that him? Hang on.
Did I just break something here?
Well,
I'm pretty
hang
sure
on.
it's him.
Let me double check. Hang on one sec.
I know. I'm checking this right now. I hope you don't think I'm being rude. I'm checking.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and now I'm like, wait a second.
If it's not him, it kind of looks like him. But I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him in the cast list here.
He's not credited. I'm so sorry.
We'll have to, maybe get back on that one later.
Yeah.
But like, I was looking, I was like, is that him?
Yeah. I see. Oh, do you know who I see? I see Tom Patchett and I think it's Jay Tarsis, who that is. Sorry. They're the writers who wrote Muppet Take Manhattan. I believe it's Jay Tarsis.
I'll take 2 out of 3.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to.
Yeah. Hey, it's just like Meatloaf said. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah. And look, I would do anything for love, but I won't let you say that Elliot Gould is in.
Hey, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Make America Great Again. That's a more
yeah. Oh, his final quote.
Yeah, the last couple of years. Yeah,
I think his final quote is, "I'm not getting that shot." Yikes! Ugh, terrible.
Although at my wedding, like meatloaf came up, and I stood in front of the wedding, and I said, "If you're cutting some meatloaf, I'm gonna have some." So like, I don't know.
So yeah, then we get to 1981 though. Back to the Muppets, the second leg of that trilogy or I guess trilogy. It's not really a trilogy, but they're all sequential.
Like, those 3 to me have the most like shared DNA.
Yeah, for sure. Because then we get the Great Muppet Caper, and which is so fun to go back at it and even see some of the I guess for my age too, seeing like Diana Rigg in that role, where wasn't somebody I really grew up with until I had watched like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, or then and then obviously Game of Thrones, and you're like, oh my god, there she is. She's been in this movie my whole life, and I had no idea who she really was.
Yeah.
Or no context.
Yeah, I like that. I like that movie. I used to not really enjoy that movie as much, and for some reason, something just clicked in the last like 10 years or so, where it was like, oh no. I think it's mostly Grodin, to be honest with you. I think that's like a bit, but I really do. I think that movie's very fun, and the music slaps, and just a lot of funny jokes in it.
Yeah,
I love the opening and like in the balloon where they're like, "What's that, Kermit?" Oh, it's the opening credits.
The one scene that I don't think ever hit me for me as a kid, but then coming back to it again later, where you start to appreciate really, is when they're going to like John Cleese's house, and he's like, "Oh, that looks like a pig."
That scene like is just like slapping your knee the whole time, having fun, just because John Cleese is the greatest. And I think Peter Ustinov shows off in that one too, right? Yeah, he's like the driver. Okay.
Yep.
He's with Oscar.
He's doing a quick cameo.
Yeah. But the joke about Fozzie and Kermit being brothers,
hilarious,
so funny. Them not being able to tell frogs and bears apart is so funny. And then when they're in the park and the man and his daughter walk by, it's Jerry Nelson, who was the Count, and he was Floyd in the Electric Mayhem, a whole bunch of stuff. And that's his daughter. And Look, Dad, a bear, and he goes, "No, Christine, that's a frog. Bears wear hats," is maybe the funniest joke of all time.
For sure. And Jack Warden kind of nails a line about them looking similar. I just got into Jack Warden appreciation because I saw, was it the client, the one with Paul Newman. I watched all The Verdict.
Yeah.
And there was Jack Warden in there, so I was happy to see him. I love it when Peter Falk is just he's credited as the tramp, just kind of walks in, and Kermit is almost rudely dude, I'm making a movie here. Peter Falk's oh yeah, sorry, I can get you if you say.
It's so good. I think, and it's something that the Muppets do well, and it's something I do want to talk about too when we get to Muppets Take Manhattan, but the deadpan humor of just exactly like the jokes you're talking about, of just how people are like, oh, obviously bears wear hats. It's there's just such a commitment to the bit in a lot of this movie that I think for some kids, it's almost can be too dry, even though you're sort of haha, it's the Muppets. Mm-hmm. But then God, you watch this as an adult and you're just this is maybe low key one of the funniest ones. It's just so good.
Well, that's what there's a lot of humans in these movies that are used to varying degrees of successfulness. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are the most successful are the ones who treat this like they're just working with another actor. It's not anything different than doing a scene with Paul Giamatti or doing a scene with whoever. It's just another person in front of you. And the people who can't necessarily wrap their brain around that are the ones that get forgotten by the wayside.
Yeah. And there's certainly one actor in particular in an upcoming movie I want to talk about that with, because I think I would argue that he does it better than anybody else has done it in the entire Muppet run. Yeah. But I mean, before we even get over to that, though, then we did have the Muppets Take Manhattan. What's your feel on this movie, Patrick?
I think the music is really good in it. Mm-hmm. I think, or there's a couple songs that are really good. I think Saying Goodbye is really good. I think Together Again is really good. Mm-hmm. I really like seeing them in New York. Just out in real New York. Yeah. Imagine you can tell where the rest of my review is going, because those are the only things that I'm really praising currently. Yeah. I think the movie's fine. I think it's, it's definitely the weakest of the three. It's not as funny. I think there's some funny jokes in it, but I think it kind of drags a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's obviously nice to see all the original guys still there, still doing it. But it definitely feels the most dated of the three too. You're oh, this is 1983 or whatever it is. You're this is definitely the 80s, because they're in the real world and they all have perms. It's just very much that's what this is.
Yeah. I mean, I would even go to the extent though too of I think in the first 30 minutes, I mean, I just watched this movie not too long ago, but it's just there's two skirt chasing jokes in the movie, and I'm oh boy. It felt a little even just sort of off color for the Muppets, and I'm man, that's just I don't know, definitely an 80s moment for sure.
And that's sometimes the thing I struggle with more current Muppets. Was definitely not as much a Jim Henson thing, was the slightly off-color comedy that doesn't seem quite like the Muppet vibe, which happened kind of later with that The Office style show. Mm-hmm. But I did not get to Muppets Manhattan because I was not going to spend the $4.99 on it. Like I said, I did spend it for Muppets in Space, but it wasn't happening for Manhattan.
It's worth it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk a little about In Space, because it's one that I'm less familiar, but I have. Or no, did I say I had seen that? I'm doubting it. I'm
you would have remembered, man.
I think I have watched parts of. I don't think I could say I watched it from start to finish, because I remember there's parts with Gonzo in there where he is going through his exploration, and I love Gonzo as a character.
There are famously a lot of parts of Gonzo in that movie. There's a lot of it.
I could be yes, this generic part number one.
It's mostly a Gonzo movie.
Yeah.
So I think we should, because we are kind of going a little slow here, I think we should tackle these two the same, because they kind of have the same catch, such as the Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island. Am I skipping any?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I just think because this is where they're gonna we're gonna pick a classic story, we're gonna throw in our guys, and one heavy,
Right.
Yeah. What are your guys' feelings on these two?
I really like Muppet Treasure Island.
Yeah. I'm very happy to hear that.
That's my take.
Are you not a fan of Muppet Christmas Carol?
Well, look, we'll get to our rankings when we get to our rankings.
Because I'll make this argument for, well, one, Tim Curry is a national treasure, both in this country and in Great Britain. So it's definitely not to be sold short that he is doing excellent work in Muppet Treasure Island, and he's never phoned in a role, in my opinion.
Yes.
But also, I feel like Michael Caine, exactly what we were talking about before, maybe committed the most to the bit of just like, I am not acting with Muppets. I don't even see Muppets across from me. I see like Dennis Hopper, and he's just playing this with like Hugh Grant or somebody like that. Like he has that energy the whole movie, and I don't think and kind of the same thought as Yoda. Like it falls apart if he doesn't do it that way.
Here's my thing: that movie's not funny.
That's true.
I'd agree with that.
That's not what I want out of a Muppet movie.
Yeah, there are some fun bits with them like narrating like some of that meta stuff, but yeah, there isn't gags.
But I can count them on this hand, you know.
Yeah, I get you. But like I do like some of those songs in there. I think there's some good holiday jams. I love the Ghost of Christmas Present, his song. You know.
Yeah, right.
I think we did our Christmas episode and we did like our top 3 Christmas songs, and that made it on my list.
Which is no doubt.
I should also say there's no bad Muppet movie.
Yeah.
Every movie is every theatrically released Muppet movie. I'll make that caveat. Every theatrically released Muppet movie is at least good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's my take. So, no, I do think that movie looks very good. I think Brian Henson, who directed that and Muppet Treasure Island, is a very good director, and I wish he would have tried some live action stuff or some other animated type of things just to I'm just curious what else he has in him, and it feels like we're not going to get something else anymore. And I think it was sort of what they needed to do at that point after Jim had died. They needed to figure out how to reinvent it a little bit and not just seem like business as usual. And they sort of had to sideline Kermit a little bit. Like Kermit's in that movie, but he definitely is like, he's not the lead of that movie. He's not even like, maybe he's second lead, I guess he's second lead, but like, it doesn't feel like it, you know, he's supporting.
Right. I mean, even when you talk about A Christmas Carol separate from that movie, Bob Cratchit's not one of the characters you're like talking about, right?
No. I feel like people talk about Bob Cratchit because they're talking about Kermit. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're like, oh, Kermit, yeah, Bob Cratchit, sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's rare. That's the one I probably rewatched the least.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Treasure Island is a lot of fun. I will definitely agree with you there. There is that felt like they were definitely putting a lot more jokes, which I think a pirate story of any kind will lend itself to that. You could almost make the argument that it walked so that Pirates of the Caribbean could run.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Because
No, I was gonna say it's really funny, and there's a lot of really solid jokes. I think the Cabin Fever song is really good.
Hell yes.
It's called When Love Is Gone. Is that the one that the Kermit and Piggy sing while they're hanging upside down? I don't remember.
The kid's song is pretty good too, if I recall. The main kid sings a song again. That's not too bad. Because that can be kind of Klein, but it was pretty good.
And he's not bad in that movie either.
No.
Like for being a child actor, I guess he's a little bit older than what you think of as a kid, but like he's pretty good in it. Yeah, it's a fun movie. It's a very silly movie, which I appreciate, and I think was needed after Christmas Carol.
Yeah, and it's nice that it's also, I think it's one of the few that has a child like lead as one of them, which is different.
Yeah.
Usually it's them around adults, but this is kind of like, because I feel like Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island, and even Muppets in Space are definitely more of a family film more than like a for everybody film. I feel like those are two different things somehow.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think Muppet Treasure Island does have more of the feel of like a kid's movie than Muppet Christmas Carol does. But I think it's because the source material, again, kind of lends itself to that. Where Christmas Carol, I mean, it's almost assigned reading in some high schools, right? It's like, understand how capitalism is cruel. And we haven't learned that lesson. But I just love in like Muppet Treasure Island, like you got Billy Connolly coming in and just hamming it up and really sets the tone for stuff in there.
Immediately.
So good.
Immediately. It's great.
Yeah, just the Jimmy Jim. It's fantastic.
So fun.
All right, you guys want to lay it down on Muppets in Space? Because I need to hear the takes on this movie. This is 1999, right?
Yeah.
Well, like for me, I'll just jump in before, like, because I had this thought in my head was, I love they all live in this big house that's full of this life. Like all these Muppets are in this house. It's got this funk soundtrack, so it's got like Brick House playing. It utilizes characters like, you know, Swedish Chef. It like has like everyone you love, but it's like living as this community. And then you take Gonzo, who like we've never even questioned, like, what's his deal? What is he? And he gets his own story. It's very funny. It has cameos that are definitely like they didn't have the power they used to. I think it's like Hulk Hogan, F. Murray Abraham,
Rob Schneider, Andy McDowell. It's a weird group.
But it's got a lot of heart, and it's like Patrick said, this one's got jokes. Like I kind of like, I don't know, I feel weird about Pepe. I don't know if he's a little too like aggressive, but he's still like less aggressive than like Pepe Le Pew.
Absolutely, yeah. I've come around on Pepe. I used to not be a big Pepe guy, and then again one day it just clicked, and I was like, oh no, Pepe's my guy. I like Pepe.
Pepe coming hard.
Yes. It was a movie that I don't think it was the most fun production for them, because for a very long time it was called Muppets in Space. And it was a sci-fi movie about them in space, basically. Wow. And then pretty last second they rewrote it. I don't know if it was a budget thing or what, but they were like, oh no, it's Muppets from Space, and it's about this alien thing. So I think it was a little tough, but yeah, the jokes are really funny in it. It was probably the first one I saw in theaters. I don't remember seeing Treasure Island in theaters, but I would have been 7 for Muppets from Space, which is kind of the perfect age for it. It's also, I really liked Muppets Tonight, which was the 90s TV show they did, the 96, 5, 6, somewhere around there. And it's got a lot of those characters in it. You know, you get your Bobos, you get your Johnny Fiammas, you get your Pepes, whatever on there. So I was all about that. And it felt like, oh, we're turning the tide. We're starting a new chapter with new characters, new, you know, things. And I think that movie's really fun. I think who's good in it? I'm trying to think. David Arquette's funny in it, and Ray Liotta's funny in it. Yes. And Jeffrey Tambor is very funny in it.
Yeah, him and Bobo together are kind of like a great duo.
Yeah, it's a little weird watching it now because you're just like, oh, come on, man. But he's very funny in it. So, yeah, I like that movie.
Yeah, I always remember there's like a bit where the spaceship comes down and it's really small and they're all kind of around it. Like Pepe says something like, back up. There could be chocolate in it, okay? Like, I don't know why I just love that joke so much.
I think my favorite joke is Tambor's shouting at his assistant Bobo to get him the remote, and you just hear Bobo in the other room go, "The goat?"
The remote.
The remote. And it makes me laugh every time.
Yeah, he has that like pretty funny cringe moment too, where they're all kind of doing like a shared laugh, and then he takes it to the next level. And he's like, "Stop laughing at me!" Like it's just, I don't know. It really reminded me of like him on the Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Muppets Tonight though too, because I felt like that's something that. So this was kind of like their second go at doing something like the Muppet Show, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was on ABC. Look, not to plug my own thing, but if people want to learn more about Muppets Tonight, the George Lucas Talk Show did a marathon where we watched every episode of Muppets Tonight and had a bunch of puppeteers and writers and directors and guest stars and stuff on the show to talk about it also. It's very fun.
Nice.
Hell with other people, I'll watch that.
It's really interesting. There was something, not to sidebar really quick, but I was talking with Connor Ratliff, who plays George Lucas on the show, 3 months ago, something like that, about Henry Kissinger and how he was going to be in the first Muppet movie, but it just didn't work out. So I went on his Muppet Wiki page, and it said he was also supposed to be in the first episode of Muppets Tonight, and it didn't work out. And I was like, that's crazy. I've never heard that. That's insane. How has that piece of information gotten by me? And I looked at the citation, and I clicked on it, and it was our show. All right, I guess so.
You made it reality.
Made it a reality, yeah.
Kissinger still kicking around? Like, he's like 100 now.
Still around. He's still around.
Well, he could show up in a Disney Plus show.
The spin-off of Frost Nixon before the Nixon version.
It's 2 seasons, and there's a lot of really good guests. You have like Sandra Bullock and John Goodman and Rick Moranis and just like Martin Short, just like really solid guests. Garth Brooks, and I wish it had caught on, because I do think once they find their footing on it, like most Muppet shows, that's how I feel about the 2015 one too. Once they find their footing, I think it gets better, and I think it could have been, another multi-season thing, but they didn't want to do it, and they sort of burned it off at the end and like sent it to Disney Channel and just like didn't.
Yeah, not to backtrack too much, but I think we did kind of lose the thread on some of the TV shows too. And I know we're spending a lot of time talking about the highlights, but I feel like that's because that's what the Muppets is. It's all highlights, baby. There's nothing wrong with this stuff. But it's, because the Muppet Show ran for 5 years, ended in 1981. Then they had the Muppet Babies based on the Muppets Take Manhattan. That ran for 6 seasons, believe it or not, which is kind of wild. But I mean, that's something I remember watching as a kid.
For sure.
And just all the different like parodies and stuff that they were doing. It kind of felt akin to what they ended up doing with like Muppet Treasure Island and Muppet Christmas Carol. So, yeah, but it really kind of felt like, I mean, it's sort of a series of starts and stops, which is too bad because, I think there's a space for something like the Muppet Show or like Muppets Tonight that you're describing. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that as we keep going, but it just feels like we keep kind of missing that energy.
Yeah, I think there's still a space for it, and I think especially in the age of TikTok and YouTube, doing a sketch show feels like a very obvious. You should do this because this will catch on online, and like these clips will go viral. Like,
oh, for sure,
they will. It is the obvious thing to do, and I think there has to be some reason why they are not doing it. Because I'm not the only person who's ever said this. Like, I'm sure they've thought about it. I don't know what that reason could possibly be.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely just feels like it's all out of money and Disney making hard decisions or quick decisions, I think. And we could get a lot about that. But I mean, I do want to talk at least about kind of the last leg of the journey here, because then there was a theatrical dry spell for the longest time in their reign. And that we didn't have anything until, is it like 2012 then that the Muppets?
I think it's 2011. I think it's November 2011.
Yeah. But and I mean, you get this idea where Jason Segel, obviously a huge Muppets fan himself, comes up with this pitch and is able to get this thing off the ground and really bring it back. And as we kind of talk about it, it's sort of a soft reboot of the original Muppet movie, but with a lot of love, you can tell, for the Muppet Show. So how do you guys feel about this movie?
I think that movie's a lot like Force Awakens in that it is exactly what it needs to be. Where it's like, we got to reintroduce everybody to this. Some people don't know what this is. Some kids are going to see this as their first introduction. Like, we have to like show them what the Muppets / Star Wars is. Let's sort of play the hits a little bit, Yeah. And I think it's a good movie. I think the biggest problem with that movie for me, and it's not even a problem necessarily, it's just the biggest thing that I don't always gel with, is it's a lot of humans.
Yes.
And not as much Muppets as I want. It's more of a Jason Segel movie than a Muppet movie, in my opinion. But I do really like the movie. And when it came out, I was, over the moon, because it did well. And it seemed like it was like, great, we're in a new golden age of Muppets. Like, here we go. It felt like that movie sets up at the end, like, we're doing the Muppet Show again. Here we go.
Yeah.
And then they didn't do the Muppet Show again.
It really felt like they were back.
Yes, but it felt like if you're gonna greenlight a new Muppet Show, now's your time. This movie did well. Like now's the time to do it. You know,
it won and got at least nominated for an Oscar for the Man Muppet song.
I think it won.
I thought it did too, but ever since the Elliot Gould thing, I didn't want to commit. You know,
I think it won. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because it was Brett McKenzie from Flight of the Conchords that did the music.
Right, which I assume you must have been some sort of a Flight of the Conchords fan, reading that or Brett McKenzie was going to write on it. That must have been huge.
Yeah, it was exciting. And those songs are really good. They feel like the Muppets. He does the music for the second one, for Most Wanted too, I think.
Yes, he does.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those songs are really good too, I think. That but yeah, I think he's very good at tugging on the heartstrings that need to be tugged, and like being silly when it needs to be silly. And he follows the Paul Williams from the original Muppet movie. He follows the playbook of like, this song, it needs to be here, it will be funny, this song will be sad, this will make you cry, this one will be funny again. Like they're doing very similar things, both successfully.
Yeah, the Force Awakens thing is a great comparison, because I think it was always a solid movie for me. It just never stays with me.
Sure. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that too, because I feel like when you watch it again, and it did win for best for Man or Muppet, that song did win. So Brett McKenzie does have an Oscar, which kind of rolls.
I like that. Yeah.
The second best thing to happen after not to win last year. So,
hell yeah.
But it's definitely, when you watch it, I think that some of the jokes are good. I do agree, it's definitely human heavy. The songs, the music is great. It really, that's one of the things, my favorite parts of that. And I like when a musical gets that the songs need to be plot relevant.
Yeah.
I remember just the podcast for I think it's How Did This Get Made, and they talk about Grease 2. And like, I feel like they call that out too. It's like there's a difference between Grease and Grease 2. Is like Grease 2 songs are like not plot relevant. They're just kind of about things. And so it's kind of where they don't really stick with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing the Muppets do a great job of, is that the songs all kind of tie into like characters' emotions or characters' journeys, right? And it's something that I really appreciated about this new Muppet movie, while accepting that also it's sort of like, it can be a little, you can almost kind of confuse it for the original in some parts.
Yeah. The songs matter. Right? That's the important thing. Is like, the song, it makes a difference to the movie. It's important. So
yeah. And I think when you talk about Muppets Most Wanted, if we just want to jump into that before just kind of starting to the end of these highlights, but it definitely feels like still the songs are good, but there are a couple where I feel like they're sort of serving a device rather than being a character mover. And it almost seems like there's too much time spent with Constantine, like the fake Kermit. And I'm like, but we're not really on a journey with Constantine, right? We should be on the journey with Kermit.
Yeah. But at the same time, I like a new character being introduced.
Sure. And the gag of him trying to get the Kermit impression down is so good. So for you, Fred, he's like trying to take Kermit's role, and so he's like trying to like watching old Muppet Show episodes, and he's like, "Hi ho."
Oh, I can totally relate listening to Kermit voices and trying to understand. That's what I did the other day.
Yeah. But again, I think it's exactly as you said. It's that there's not a bad Muppet movie, but I did think I liked the first Muppets there first.
Yeah.
And then we did have the Muppets. We were talking about the Office TV show, or Office-like TV shows, like the Muppets, period.
Yeah.
Which to me made sense as a move, because I feel the Muppet Show, the original, was a reflection of the kind of show that was popular at the time, a variety show. Yeah. And so it kind of made sense to do this like found footage thing. And I never like disliked the idea, just the execution never really worked for me.
Yeah, I think the beginning of that movie, or the beginning of that show, starts a little rough because I think they're finding their footing and figuring out how to make that work. But then midway through, they change the showrunner, and it sort of revamps itself around, I think the Christmas episode.
Oh, wow.
And I do think it picks up steam towards the end. And by the end, you're like, I could watch another season of this show. Because I obviously, like, no kidding, I love the Muppets, whatever. But like, I'm also very critical of a lot of stuff where I'm just
Right.
like, no, you can do this. I know this can be like 20% better than what it is. And that was one of the things where in the beginning where I was like, is this the nail in the coffin that like, oh, is this the last Muppet thing? You know?
Yeah.
And they figure it out towards the end, but it was definitely too late. Because like if you look at the ratings for that show, like they start pretty good. Like the
Right.
ratings are like pretty solid for that pilot, and then it immediately like craters down, which is it's a shame. But I think there's funny stuff in that show.
For sure. I do remember watching the first couple episodes of that at the very least. I thought I had watched most of the season, but now I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna finish it now that you said that, knowing that just to see the difference after the hand change there.
Yeah.
It's still not perfect, but it is. I think one of the problems with that show is a lot of the writers were like sitcom writers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it needs to be a very specific type of writer writing for the Muppets, or you at least need to have like one or two guys in there who can really like get those hard jokes in there and like get those silly Muppet plots in there instead of like Miss Piggy goes to a yoga class and has a wardrobe malfunction. You know, like it's like, okay, I get it, but it's not necessarily Muppet. I it's not perfect by the end, but I do think it gets better.
Definitely. And then we did have a kind of a start and stop with Muppets Now, right? For kind of a controversy about how quick the plug got pulled on this one.
Well, with Muppets Now, they shot it as shorts that were going to be released on YouTube. They were just like YouTube shorts. That was it. They were going to be released over like 6 months or something like that. And then COVID happened and they were like, oh shit, we don't have any content to put out. So let's take all of these shorts, film stuff at home, like have the Muppet performers film stuff from their house to make as like wraparound content. So if you go watch those now, it's like they're like on Zoom basically.
Oh wow!
Like the whole thing is like they have a new. I watched it once, so bear with me if I'm trying to remember that they have a show that needs to get released. Scooter is at home and like needs to like bring all the files to like send it off to be released, and a lot of it is them talking to each other over the computer while the different sketches go in and out.
You know, that's producing George Lucas talk show. I feel that had been an interesting experience to watch because I feel like that's kind of the vibe sometimes when I watch it.
Yeah. Where it's like, oh, we didn't do that already. That's not done. Okay, well, let's rush really quick before it needs to go up. Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. There's funny stuff in it, but I think it would have worked better as shorts just because it gets a little repetitive because they only do like 3 different sketches, but they do like 4 variations of each sketch. Pretty much.
Yeah. Because it almost sounded like it was going to be something that you were even saying you would want them to see, like kind of doing like sketches or like shorts that could be perfect for TikTok.
Yeah.
Like it almost felt like, that's they were reading the tea leaves right, but then they had a reverse course because obviously worldwide pandemic. But
again, you got to have good writers in there, you know? And I think that's a big part of it is like if you're paying good writers and like funny guys who love the Muppets. Like there's a whole generation of people now who grew up with the Muppets, and I think you got to find those people in order to make these characters really sing.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a great transition though to our coulda, woulda, shoulda segment where, we can start thinking about what are some things that maybe the Muppets could have done differently at that time, like maybe sticking with the original plan if they had the ability to do so. Yeah. Or, could they have had a different type of writer if somebody was still around? Or versus like, do we have some stuff? Because then we talked a little bit about Muppets Mayhem. And, do we want to see more things that kind of try something different of like, let's explore this part of the Muppet universe that we don't get to explore, whether or not it's necessarily a spin-off for one character or another. But I don't know. What would be your guys' pitch for like a new project or things that you would have wanted to see before?
I mean, look, I got so many ideas.
I would also want to hear, I just want to say, I would love to hear what you would want to do as a show producer for the Muppet Show.
Sure,
please.
For sure. There was a script for a long time that Frank Oz was developing. It was called The Cheapest Muppet Movie Ever Made. Because they hit a point where they're like, these movies are getting too expensive. This is like real world talk. They're like, too expensive. So he goes, okay, I'm going to write a script where that is the plot. So the movie starts and it's like a whole Mission Impossible action scene, Gonzo's flying through the sky with explosions and everything. And then 5 minutes into the movie, someone comes in and is like, what? We're out of budget. We don't have a budget anymore. The whole rest of the movie is them just like, you know, putting up cardboard sets and like throwing on a paper bag as a costume and stuff like that. And it's a really funny idea. And I wish they had done that. That was like around Muppets from Space Time, maybe a little bit after that. But I think it's a funny idea. And I think they need to be a little more, you know, thinking outside the box with that kind of stuff, because that's a fun, different type of thing that I've never seen it in a movie. Like, it's a good idea, you know?
Right.
I wish they would just do the damn Muppet Show again. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to be the booker or producer or whatever for the dang Muppet Show. Like, that's it. That is the career goal. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's that hard. It doesn't seem like it would be that big of an ask. And I think there's so many celebrities out there now who would be perfect guest stars for that show. And it feels like an obvious move to do it, but not to just do it. The trap you fall into with that being on Disney or Disney Plus or ABC or whatever, and this was a trap with the ABC sitcom, was a lot of the guests were ABC or Disney centric. And I think the good thing about the old show was it was syndicated, so it didn't have any network, you know, biases or like, we need to only put frickin' Linda Carter as Wonder Woman on here because we're on CBS, you know, and she's on CBS, and that's it. So I think the way to do it is you just like, it can't just be the cast of Blackish, you know, it can't just be the cast of whatever. It's got to be, you got to be able to have an SNL person, but also a Law and Order person, but also, you know, Seth Rogen, but also whatever. And I think that's how you make that movie good. I was at Disney World or Disneyland 2 days ago, and there were 0 Muppet things there. And I'm just like, the theme parks are the place where you plop the Muppets in, and it's very easy, and they would fit right in right there. And I think it's a real shame that they own this franchise, this IP, and it's just not being used. And it's like, why did you spend the money to buy it if you're not going to do that much with it? You know?
Yeah, that's like even a general parks problem, I feel. Like the Disney parks is now, like every shop has the same thing, whereas before, like, you'd go to the Muppets area and you'd find stuff you couldn't find anywhere else, but now it's like the same 6 shirts.
And now that shop isn't even open. They've closed that shop. It does not even exist anymore.
Oh god.
But the crazier part of that is that under the current Disney structure, business structure, the people who are running the Muppets is the theme park division. Which would make you think, we're running a theme park. We have control over these guys. Let's do something with them in the theme park.
Right.
You know?
Well, I heard the guy who created Muppets Mayhem, there was some talk that the Aerosmith ride was potentially going to be a Muppets roller coaster. I didn't know how much validity there was to that, but
he
sounds cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I'll never go on it. I'm not a roller coaster guy, but like,
you know what, Patrick? I am not a roller coaster guy. I went to Disney for my honeymoon. I said I was going on all of them. I had a blast.
Great. That's great. If it doesn't do a flip, I'll do it. But I think doesn't Rock and Roller Coaster have a flip in it? I feel like it does.
If it does, it's not a bad one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember going on that when I was like 13 or 12 or something.
Okay, we get it. You're cool. We get it.
Yeah, I was 31, man.
But no, what I'm saying though is like, I feel like it's something that you could handle, and it's something that like anybody of all ages then could handle, because that's what the Muppets are, right? It's like, if you're going to get people on a ride, it can't be something that is going to be like, you know, something you find at Six Flags where, you know, you're going to be throwing them around 300 loops or whatever, and you're just brain dead by the time you get off the ride. But
something great they did at Disney World, I don't know if they're still doing it, I don't think they are, was in, I think it's Magic Kingdom. They're doing this thing called Great Moments in Muppet History or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And you'd be walking through the area where like Hall of Presidents is, and up in the windows in one of the buildings, the windows would open up and there would be actual puppets. People would be doing puppets to a pre-recorded track of like Piggy, Fozzie, Kermit, whatever, recounting the Paul Revere ride or recounting the signing of the Declaration of Independence or whatever. And I think that's a good way to do it, because it's like, oh, it's a show, but it's also, you see them and they're not it's not Mickey Mouse. It's not a guy with a costume on. Like, it looks like Kermit the Frog. It sounds like Kermit the Frog. You know,
That's awesome.
I think that's maybe the key way to do it if they're not going to put the money into a ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to see more of them in the parks, or just anything more than just like the bare bones Disney stuff. I love seeing kind of the wilder stuff, the offshoots, you know?
Yeah. Right. Just to kind of, it's not a big investment even to what you were just describing. Like, that can't be that crazy to do. Like, you know, it's not like you're building a whole animatronic Spider-Man and teaching him to flip from building to building. Like, you know,
if you can build an animatronic Trump, you can do this. That was why when you said by the Hall of Presidents, I was like, yeah, I didn't go by there because I didn't want to accidentally see the Trump thing.
Yeah.
They can replace him with Fozzie Bear. It's about the same level of.
They had there was a plan. Well, they're doing something this winter. They're doing like a Christmas show in Florida.
That's what they're,
Kermit and Piggy are hosting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a pre-recorded thing again or if they're flying the guys down there. I don't know, but that'll be cool. There was talk back in the 90s. One of the early MGM things that they wanted to do was they had the Great Movie Ride. That was like one of their big flagship rides there. You go through all the old movies and see, you know, Humphrey Bogart, animatronic, whatever. They were going to have the Great Muppet Movie Ride, which was the Muppets recreating movie scenes to varying degrees of success. And that was like going to be their other flagship ride at MGM. And it never, you know, it never happened.
That'd
I don't know
cool.
how deep into production they were, or like, you know, or if it was just an idea, but it's something they were talking about.
Yeah, just because that backlot vibe of MGM just kind of like screams Muppet movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So much of MGM just screams Muppet movie. I mean, like, it was such a logical place for them to be, and I think it was so easy to dream what they could have done. But then they got IP happy. They just kept acquiring things like, we have to make everything Star Wars. We have to make everything Marvel. We have to make everything, you know, just like, oh, look what we can do now with the live action Disney stuff. And it's like, oh, for crying out loud. Like, you know, there's things for other people too.
They have a pizza restaurant that's Muppet themed there.
Oh, Rizzo's Pizza. Yeah, the character I want to associate with food.
Yes.
Which there's some great jokes in Muppets Take Manhattan, if you remember, of like the people getting grossed out that rats are serving. And I feel like people are so chill with Rizzo and like Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island.
No, we're cool with rats cooking now, especially at Disney folks. For coulda, woulda, shoulda, I did say that I kind of want another bite at the adapted classic story apple.
Yes, that was mine.
But it's kind of hard to pick because, you know, a lot of classic stories have a lot of darkness to them. I was like, you can't do like Les Mis or something with the Muppets. But I did think of one that I think could be an interesting thing. I don't know a lot about this story, but I thought, what about like Don Quixote as like a Muppets, because there's humor there. You could add a lot of stuff. And I think because Terry Gilliam has, you know, he eventually did make his Don Quixote movie, but it was a huge struggle.
I guess he made it.
Yeah.
You know anyone who's seen it?
No. But I thought it'd be kind of funny if they made like a really banging Don Quixote Muppet movie and it became super like popular. And that was the most well-known Don Quixote. Like, I think that adds to like Terry Gilliam making that movie, him being like the Don Quixote of his own story. That at the end, you know what's great? The Muppets Don Quixote movie.
Or just like go with a tried and true though too. You could do like the Three Muppeteers or something like that, right?
I've got Musketeers as my other one.
Just make it Kermit, Fonzie, and Gonzo, and like you got like Miss Piggy as D'Artagnan, just to fucking throw a total wrench into things, right? Just so you can get Bobo as like the Cardinals, like like assistant.
They did Wizard of Oz, which is one we didn't talk about. It was a TV special, and it's sort of there's funny stuff in it, but it's sort of regarded as like the bottom, you know.
I had that VHS. Now that I think about, because I think the Scrubs people show up in that one.
The Scrubs people are in It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas.
That's the one I must have had.
Which is like It's a Wonderful Life, which of course famously Kermit wishes he was never born, and then they go to that reality where he was never born, and he calls Miss Piggy in her apartment in New York, and you see out of her window in New York in 2002 when this movie was released, the World Trade Center.
Oh no!
Which means did Kermit somehow inadvertently cause 9/11?
Hey, if Mark Wahlberg would have been there, though. Right?
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of scratched it out, but I'm gonna say this. I even thought like maybe taking like instead of a classic story, maybe like an older classic movie because we're in like the land of reboots. And I really was like playing with the idea of like a Jaws Muppets, but then again I was like, the murder's kind of hard, but could you imagine like Kermit as Roy Scheider?
Yeah.
Get like David Harbour just to be Robert Shaw. And then Gonzo is Richard Dreyfuss, of course.
Right.
I think I would like a comedy version of Jaws with them.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's fun.
Or what about Casablanca?
Yeah.
Here's looking at you, piggy.
I don't know.
I mean, you got Rolf who plays the piano that's like already there.
Play the game, Rolf.
I'm sure they would love to remake a movie chock full of Nazis. I'm sure that's like the high point of what they want out of a new Muppet.
But it's actually a movie that presents the Nazis as the bad guys. Oh boy.
And then the last final thing is we've been talking a lot about official and unofficial like cookbooks. Give me a Swedish Chef cookbook.
Yeah.
Oh, that doesn't exist. Come on.
I didn't Google it. I just wanted to put it out there.
I don't think it does.
I think Patrick would know if there was a Swedish Chef cookbook.
Yeah, I don't think there is. There might be a piggy one, but I don't think there's a chef one.
Yeah, I love any Muppet where the performer uses their hands.
Yeah.
I think that's always an interesting design.
Yeah.
There's a Muppet Picnic cookbook from 1981, and there's In the Kitchen with Miss Piggy. So you need that chef stuff.
Yeah. There is a red bubble. It looks like it's just a poster. I'm sorry, that's not a cookbook. they threw me off. They were trying to throw something in, but it is a great poster. It says, "I don't always hurdy bird murder flirty flirpin, but when I do, you're the."
It's always good.
Yeah, it's always good. I mean, great. Yeah,
we'll get that for you, Patrick. That's your thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just what I need. Another piece of Muppet merch in my phone.
Clearly, you don't have enough. Yeah.
No.
So, should we get to our power rankings then?
Let's do it.
Do it.
And the question for this week that we're going to do is your top 3 Muppet. Well, I guess we were debating this, and maybe we will have to do both. Top 3 Muppet characters and top 3 Muppet. Should we do movies or should we do anything goes?
Yeah, I think anything goes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you could put in a TV show. We'll say your favorite Muppet media property.
So favorite Muppet media property and favorite Muppet?
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Oh, wow. Oh, so we're just combining them.
No. 2.
We're going to go one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you got some time. Hit us with your media properties though, Patrick. What do you got for your top 3?
I mean, number 1 is these are obvious ones. Number 1's the Muppet movie. Number 2 is the Muppet Show. But if we're opening up to media properties, I might make number 3 Muppet 3D.
Oh,
nice. Yeah,
that's a good pick.
like that.
I have the ranking. I brought up my movie ranking right here because I thought we were just doing movies. I'll do it really quick. It's Muppet Movie, Great Muppet Caper, Muppets from Space, Muppet Treasure Island, The Muppets, Muppets Most Wanted, Muppets Take Manhattan, Space, the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Whoa,
Mr. Humbug over here.
Uh-huh.
I'm pleased as punch you have space so high because I thought I was like the only one.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Fred.
So for properties, I'm gonna the movie's number 1. You can't beat it. It's the best. Muppet Christmas Carol is my number 2. Okay, I'm not gonna move off that. Not gonna get big leagued here. Number 2, number 3. I'm gonna give Muppets in Space just because it's got such a soft spot for me.
Oh, yeah.
It ekes out the caper, but I love space.
Wow. So I've had a shakeup recently. I mean, I got to watch Space. So I mean, I'll put the caveat that I have not really watched that one from start to finish. So this might change in years to come. But if I had to go off the cuff right now, I think, the Muppet movie, the original,
Mhm.
Number 1. I think number 2, I am going to go Great Muppet Caper, though.
Okay.
I had a lot of love, and I think I had a really good experience with that recently.
Yeah.
So, going to put that at 2. And then number 3, I might have to go with the Muppet Christmas Carol as well. I do like Muppet Treasure Island a lot. I had a lot of love for that movie as a kid, and that's a close 4, I think, for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like Muppet Christmas. The songs are so good. We were just talking about music before.
Live your life. It's fine.
We have to descend. If we all agreed on everything, we wouldn't have
fun.
interesting lives.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch to characters then. You can go ahead first, Patrick.
Number 1, with a bullet, New Zealand.
Yes.
The man who has boomerang fish. He throws them and they come back to him. Number 2, Gonzo.
Yeah.
Number 3, Fozzie, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah. But with a bullet, number 1, and then long distance second, Gonzo.
Fantastic name, New Zealand, to be honest. So good.
And then I'll throw you the curveball. Which Muppet do you think you're the most like?
Oh boy. I mean, I get Scooter a lot. Scooter's the one that gets thrown at me, so I feel like it's probably that.
He's the glue guy, so we can definitely see that about you.
I think you're like a more Kermit like Scooter though, because you also I think you can rally.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Good.
I'll take it.
Fred?
For me, I'm gonna go Fozzie is my number 1 guy. I just kind of relate to like, a guy with a belly who's like optimistic and just like and also just can't read the room a lot of the times. I love that when Fozzie just comes into a room and like just doesn't know what's going on, but he's on his own wavelength. I got a lot of love for Rizzo. I just love that he's like the scumbum Muppet. Like he's always got a good jacket, I feel, going.
Yeah.
There's a great bit in Muppets in Space where he ends up in like a testing clinic with other tough mice, and like it's the best. All these like, how you doing? Like kind of guys in there. Like, you trying to get out of here? And it's a great bit. I love Rizzo, and then I have Miss Piggy as my number 3, just because like, man, I love that she brings like so much energy. I think now that I'm older and like, because when I used to watch it, I'd be like, oh yes, those are my Muppet friends. They move freely. There aren't people controlling them. Mm-hmm. When you go back and watch now and just see the stuff Frank Oz is doing, like with Piggy, it's stellar work. And I think Miss Piggy, she can kind of like people overlook her because she can be a lot, but I think there's a lot of facets to Miss Piggy, and she's an interesting character.
Yeah, I think there's definitely points in a lot of the movies and even the show where when Piggy comes on screen, you can feel the energy shift, and it hits a new level. So it's a great pick. I'll go quick. I got a boring first one. Maybe it's boring. I don't know. I love Kermit. I am
Nothing
just
wrong with that.
Right.
Green's my favorite color. So when he said it's not easy, I felt it in my bones. So Kermit number 1. Number 2, I will go Gonzo though. I do think that's the Muppet I relate the most to, but I do like Kermit just a bit more than Gonzo. But Gonzo always cracks me up. And then number 3, I gotta go with the Swedish Chef, just because the nonsense that he spurts as he's doing his act just never fails to crack me up. It's so funny.
Good answer.
Yeah.
You're gonna love Muppets from Space.
I know. I'm kind of like, this was a miss for me to not seek it out. So it'll probably go on tonight.
Yeah, we could do a follow-up addendum once you watch it.
Great.
I like it.
I like it. Little bonus franchise installment. So I think that gets us to the end of our episode. But before we let you go, Patrick, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, you can watch George Lucas Talk Show. It's all on YouTube. Every episode that we've done for the last 3 years, it's been like, it's more time by far than they've made for The Simpsons. That's what we like to tell people. If you live in the UK or anywhere around there, we're going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival for all of August, doing the show and doing a play that Connor wrote for him in character with Griffin playing Watto. So that'll be very silly, very dumb. If you live in Los Angeles, I do a bunch of live shows, including Untitled Improv Project, which is at least going through July, but there may be some other cool stuff coming later in the summer. You can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Cotnoir, on Instagram at Cotnoir, and I'll post about any live shows that I'm working on, but always fun stuff, always silly stuff. So if you're around, come hang out.
Yeah, some absolutely awesome projects you're involved with. I mean, really, it's worth everyone's time to check it out. The George Lucas Talk Show is hilarious. It's just,
yeah, I don't know if you guys are doing any more, like ever going to plan another U.S. tour, but that was one of the best shows I ever went to. We were in Milwaukee. We went out to Detroit for that show.
I thought we met in Detroit, right? Because did you come up at the end?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember.
I wore my Toy Story hat. I was feeling real cool that day. Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to record or do the remote and me be in my room. I had my poster up, and I was like, I'm going to have the poster up. He's going to see it. He's going to know what's up.
It's great.
But I would definitely recommend following Patrick on Twitter. He's a good follow, and you're good about posting the shows you're involved with and the people that are in the shows. It's insane.
Look,
like Stephen Tobolowsky was your monologist.
Had him last night. He was the best, a king, a legend. Yeah. But look, you gotta post about it. You gotta get butts in seats. It's really hard to get butts in seats, and so that means I have to annoy everyone else about it.
No. I always try to, whenever I see those, I always try to retweet because, I know it's a good quality show and a good quality thing that if anyone's in the area, they should go check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred, what about you? Anything you'd like to plug?
I'll be writing and performing in Sketch 22. If people are not familiar with that, I would check out the website. It's where the writers get, I guess, a premise or some sort of suggestion, and they write the sketch that night. And then the next day, everyone shows up and they have to perform it. I'm writing and performing in it. I'm pretty excited about that. Other than that, check out the Interchange Theater. I'm kind of swinging back into doing more improv and stuff. I took a little break because I went back to work. But yeah, interchangetheater.com, or check me out at FJD the Third on Twitter. And check out the podcast Twitter page as well. What about you, Tom?
Well, I will also be acting in Sketch 22, but only acting. So tickets are available for that at schmitzandgiggles.org. That's all one word, Schmitz and Giggles. That show will be on Saturday, July 22nd. Over at Comedy Sports Theater in Milwaukee. So yeah, very excited to do that. And yeah, you can just follow me on Twitter at tstads20. We are at State of the Franchise Podcast at gmail.com. If you'd like to send us an email with any questions or any comments you would like shared on the show, we will read those live on air. We've done it before. We'll do it again. State of the Franchise with Fred and Tom. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Check us out on there. Just look us up. And if you want to leave us a one-time donation, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/SOTF. You can also sign up for a repeat donation if you would like. But really, we're most thankful for you just tuning into the show every time we drop an episode. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. You are a fountain of knowledge about the Muppets, which is amazing.
Thank you for having me. I'm so sorry for just monologuing.
No, that's exactly, honestly, when we pitched the show, this is what we envisioned. So it was the perfect version of it.
And also, I should say, if I got anything wrong and someone is listening, furiously listening to their iPhone, don't tell me.
No, you can come to me and let me know. If they got problems, they can come to me.
Yeah, they can email us at stateofthefranchisepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for next time, where we'll be talking about The Elder Scrolls. Ooh. Yes, popular video game series. We'll be talking all about it, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
And time is on the mic. I got no cares, 'cause all I wanna do is charge my phone, drive, listening to you. And what they talk to you about will always be up to you.
And why are there so many podcasts about movies? I don't know. But then we're not a movie podcast. I don't know.